On an autumn afternoon in Seattle, the cityscape visible from the window of the graphic design office was adorned with maple leaves dyed orange. Rachel Miller checked the time while displaying the design proposals for her latest project on the screen. 3:30 p.m. It was almost time for Jacob to come home from school. "Mom, I'm home." The sound of the front door opening was followed by the bright voice of her 11-year-old son Jacob. Rachel smiled and stood up to greet her son. Jacob resembled his father David, somewhat shy but caring in nature. His large brown eyes sometimes reminded her of her late husband, filling Rachel's heart with both warmth and sadness. "You had a math test today, didn't you? How did it go?" "I think I did okay. But the fraction division was a little difficult," Jacob answered while setting down his school bag. "I wonder if Dad would have helped me if he were still alive." Rachel's chest tightened. 6 years ago, David had suddenly passed away from a heart attack. He was only 32 years old. Since then, Rachel had been struggling to make it on her own. Fortunately, her skills as a graphic designer were solid, and she had been able to maintain a stable income as a freelancer. "Dad was good at math, wasn't he? But Mom will try her best to help you too," Rachel gently stroked her son's head. "Besides, Grandpa Thomas is good at math too. Let's ask him the next time we see him." David's parents, Thomas and Helen, loved Jacob dearly. Right after losing her husband, Rachel had gone through a period where she distanced herself from her in-laws due to grief, but recently they had begun to grow close again. The phone rang. The screen displayed "Mom." It was from Rachel's mother, Dorothy. "Hello, Mom?" "Rachel, how are you doing?" Dorothy's voice had its usual slightly calculating tone. "Are you free this weekend? I'd like to see you with Christina." Rachel's sister Christina had been drifting through the beauty industry, always chasing the next big opportunity. She was beautiful and sociable, but also vain and reckless with money. "Is something wrong?" Rachel felt a bit wary. Lately, contact from her mother and sister had been increasing. After David's death, they had begun reaching out frequently under the guise of family bonds. "It's nothing serious. I just thought we should make time to spend together as a family. Will Jacob come with you?" Rachel hesitated. Time spent with her mother and sister always stirred up complicated emotions. Especially recently, money had become a frequent topic of conversation. Dorothy was a former bank employee, but she had been hinting that she had suffered losses in post-retirement investments. Christina had also been bringing up investment opportunities for new businesses more often. "Of course. But I can't lend anything this time," Rachel said frankly. "Oh, what are you talking about?" "I haven't said anything about money," Dorothy's voice carried a hint of displeasure. "We're family, so you should be more open to depending on us. You're always trying too hard to do everything alone." After hanging up, Rachel felt conflicted. Family was certainly important, but lately she had been questioning her mother and sister's behavior. Especially since they learned about David's life insurance money securing Jacob's future, there had been subtle changes in their attitudes. "Mom, are you okay?" Jacob looked up at her with concern. "I'm fine. That was just a call from your grandmother," Rachel smiled. "Let's go see Grandma and Aunt Christina this weekend." "Yeah," Jacob answered happily. He genuinely loved his grandmother and aunt. At 11 years old, he couldn't understand the complicated motives of the adults. That night, Rachel gazed at a photo of her late husband while thinking. What would David make of the current situation? He had always loved family, but he also possessed practical judgment. Rachel thought that her husband would have advised her to be more cautious about her mother and sister's recent behavior. However, she also felt strongly about not wanting to doubt her blood relatives. Perhaps she was just being overly sensitive. Rachel whispered quietly to the photo, "David, what should I do?" No answer came back. The husband in the photo was simply smiling gently as always. 3 days later, on Thursday evening, Rachel's cell phone rang. Christina's name appeared on the screen. "Rachel. I have wonderful news," her sister's excited voice came through the receiver. Mom and I booked a Mediterranean cruise. Of course, you and Jacob are coming too. Rachel was surprised. A cruise? When is this? Departing next Monday. It's a 7-day cruise visiting Italy, France, and Spain. The whole family will have a wonderful time together. Next Monday? That's so sudden, Rachel was confused. I need to adjust my work schedule, and Jacob has school. It's fine, everything's already arranged. Mom already contacted your clients to request a week's vacation. I contacted the school too. Rachel was stunned. She couldn't believe that her mother and sister had contacted her work and her son's school without permission. Wait a minute, you did that without? Don't worry about the details. We're family. Besides, this is also celebrating Mom's birthday. She says she wants to enjoy life. That night, Rachel told Jacob about the cruise with mixed feelings. Her son's eyes lit up with joy. Really? We're going on a ship? I've never been on an overseas trip. That's right. But you'll have to miss a whole week of school. It's okay, Mom. I'll get my homework in advance. Jacob was already starting to plan the trip. The weekend passed, and Monday morning arrived. Rachel packed the bare essentials and headed to Seattle's port with Jacob. A magnificent cruise ship was docked at the wharf, with many passengers forming lines for boarding procedures. Dorothy and Christina had already arrived. Dorothy was wearing a new, expensive-looking dress, and Christina was carrying a brand-name bag Rachel had never seen before. Rachel. Jacob. Christina waved. Ready? A wonderful adventure is about to begin. At the check-in counter, the staff began verifying the passenger list. Dorothy Howard, Christina Howard, Rachel Miller, the clerk read each name aloud. Jacob Miller's name is not on the list, the clerk showed a confused expression. Rachel's heart nearly stopped. There must be some mistake. My son is supposed to travel with us too. The clerk checked the list again. I'm sorry, but Jacob Miller's name is not on the reservation list. Rachel turned to her mother and sister. Neither would meet her eyes. Dorothy slowly opened her mouth. Oh, I'm sorry, there was no apologetic tone in her voice at all. It was a family-only reservation. What do you mean, family only? Rachel's voice trembled. Christina giggled. Thanks for the ride. We saved on taxi fare. In that moment, Rachel understood everything. Her mother and sister had never intended to bring Jacob from the beginning. They planned to enjoy a luxurious cruise by themselves, probably hoping to meet wealthy men on board. The family trip was just a pretense, and Rachel had been used only for transportation. Jacob was desperately trying to understand the situation. Tears welled up in his large brown eyes, and he whispered in a small voice. Mom, am I not family? Those words pierced deep into Rachel's heart. She couldn't answer her son's innocent question. People around them began to take notice, and tears streamed down Jacob's cheeks. Oh, Jacob, Dorothy said coldly. There are such things as adult trips. Children get in the way. You understand, don't you? I thought Mom would understand, Christina added. We have the right to enjoy life too. You're always thinking about Jacob, but sometimes we need adult time too. Rachel gripped her son's hand tightly. Jacob's small hand was trembling. She said nothing, simply holding her son close. Indescribable anger and sadness swirled in her chest. Rachel, don't be angry, Dorothy said. We'll buy souvenirs on the way back. We'll pick out something nice for Jacob too. That's right, we'll definitely take lots of fun photos, Christina said with a smile. Next time we'll tell you the plans earlier. But Rachel was no longer listening to their words. She firmly gripped her son's hand and silently left the scene. Jacob also understood his mother's silence and followed without saying anything. On the way to the parking lot, Jacob said in a small voice, Mom, I'm sorry you couldn't go on the cruise because of me. Rachel stopped and looked at her son. Jacob, this is not your fault. You must never blame yourself. But if I wasn't here, you could have enjoyed the cruise too. Listen, Rachel placed her hand on her son's shoulder. You are the most precious person in my life. A cruise without you would have no meaning at all. While getting in the car, Rachel took out her cell phone. She dialed Thomas Miller's number. David's father's voice came through. Rachel? What's wrong? Thomas, this is sudden, but could Jacob and I come visit you right now? Rachel's voice was shaking. Of course. What happened? I'll explain the details when we get there. But right now, I want to see real family. After hanging up, Rachel looked at the port in the rearview mirror. The enormous cruise ship was already beginning preparations for departure. Dorothy and Christina were probably changing into new clothes in their cabins, preparing for a luxurious dinner. However, Rachel no longer felt any sympathy for them. This incident had revealed their true nature. Having blood relations doesn't necessarily make someone real family. True family consists of people who cherish and support each other. The car left the port and headed toward Thomas and Helen's house. Jacob gazed out the window, still occasionally wiping away tears, but his expression was gradually beginning to show signs of relief. Thomas and Helen's house was in a quiet residential neighborhood in the Seattle suburbs. After about an hour's drive, Rachel and Jacob stood in front of a front door with warm lights glowing. Even before the door opened, they could hear Helen's worried voice. Rachel, Jacob. Helen embraced them both. What happened? Your voice on the phone sounded so worried. Once they were shown into the living room, Thomas sat with a serious expression. As a former police chief, his sharp eyes immediately read the gravity of the situation from Rachel and Jacob's expressions. Jacob, there are cookies in the kitchen. Why don't you go get them with Grandma? Helen gently suggested. She understood that the adults needed to talk. After Jacob headed to the kitchen, Rachel told them in detail about what had happened at the port. Thomas and Helen listened silently, but their expressions gradually turned to anger. I can't believe it, Helen was indignant. How could a mother and sister do such a terrible thing? What a horrible treatment of my son's wife and grandson. Thomas's voice was low, with suppressed anger. If David were alive, he would never have allowed this. Actually, there's something that's been bothering me, Rachel continued hesitantly. Lately, my mother and sister have been frequently asking me for financial advice. Especially Christina, who has brought up investment opportunities for new businesses several times. Thomas leaned forward. What kind of investment opportunities? Beauty-related franchise businesses, startup capital for online shops. Every time she says it's sure to make money, but the specific business plans are always vague. That sounds suspicious, Thomas stroked his chin thoughtfully. Rachel, have you recently provided any financial assistance to your mother or sister? Small amounts, but several times. I've helped with rent assistance and helped Christina with credit card payments. Helen and Thomas exchanged glances. Rachel, do they know about David's life insurance money? Rachel nodded. Yes. I also told them that I'm saving it for Jacob's future. Thomas stood up. This isn't just a simple family problem. There's a high possibility of calculated financial motives. Let me contact an old colleague to investigate their recent activities. The next day, Rachel learned shocking facts from Thomas's phone call. Rachel, I've got the information. Your sister is receiving collection notices from multiple credit card companies. The total amount appears to exceed $80,000. $80,000? Rachel gasped. That's not all. Your mother has also gotten involved in what appear to be high-yield investment scams and has suffered considerable losses. Both of them seem to be in serious financial straits. This information revealed the true purpose behind the cruise incident. Dorothy and Christina were either looking to find wealthy men to marry on the ship, or to extract further financial assistance from Rachel. Jacob had been planned to be excluded as an unwanted presence from the beginning. That same day, Rachel also received a call from her father George. I heard about Dorothy and Christina. Thomas contacted me. George had divorced Dorothy 7 years ago, but had continued providing regular financial support to his ex-wife. However, learning about this incident had infuriated him. "I'm immediately cutting off the support. What those two did to you and Jacob is absolutely unforgivable. Dad, you don't have to go that far. No, this is a necessary measure. They need to take responsibility for the consequences of their actions." Meanwhile, on the cruise ship sailing the Mediterranean, unexpected events continued for Dorothy and Christina. On the first night, at the ship's formal dinner, the two didn't know how to behave in a high-end restaurant and received cold stares from other passengers. Christina laughed loudly, and Dorothy drank too much wine, completely ignoring table manners during the meal. On the second day, while sunbathing by the pool, Christina aggressively approached a wealthy-looking man nearby. However, the man's wife immediately appeared and expressed her displeasure. "Could you please stop approaching my husband?" "Oh, it's just a friendly conversation," Christina replied nonchalantly. On the third night, at the ship's casino, Dorothy lost most of the cash she had brought. Intoxicated, she tried to borrow money from other passengers and was warned by security staff. "This ship has standards of dignity. Please refrain from behavior that disturbs other passengers." Christina also embarrassed herself when her credit card was declined while trying to purchase expensive items at the ship's store. The clerk was polite, but there was clear contempt in their eyes. By the fourth day, the two were clearly being avoided by other passengers. In restaurants and by the pool, people would move seats when they approached. In Seattle, Rachel and Jacob were spending a wonderful week with Thomas and Helen. "Grandpa, this fishing is really hard," Jacob said while casting his line at the lakeside. "It's difficult for everyone at first. But it's important to persevere," Thomas gently taught his grandson. "Just like life." Helen prepared special home-cooked meals for Rachel and Jacob. Every evening, 3 generations gathered around the dinner table, feeling the warmth of real family. "Rachel, you're a wonderful mother," Helen said quietly one night. "David would be proud." "Thank you, Helen. This week has really shown me who true family is." Friday night, the cruise ship returned to Seattle port. Dorothy and Christina disembarked with exhausted expressions. They hadn't gained any of the wonderful encounters or elegant experiences they had hoped for. Instead, only embarrassing experiences on the ship remained in their memories. Returning home by taxi, they found more collection notices than expected in their mailboxes. Christina's debt collectors had also left several messages on voicemail, and the content was much harsher than before. The biggest shock was the notice of support termination from George. For Dorothy, who had been receiving $1,000 a month in assistance, this was a devastating blow. Why would Dad do such a thing? Dorothy trembled as she read the letter. Rachel must have tattled, Christina expressed her anger. "All we did was try to have a little fun." But reality continued to close in on them mercilessly. Christina's apartment rent was 3 months behind, and an eviction notice had also arrived. Dorothy also couldn't cover her living expenses with her pension alone. A week later, the situation finally reached its limit. Christina's debt collectors visited her apartment directly, and Dorothy's electricity and gas were shut off due to unpaid bills. The two realized they had no choice but to swallow their pride and ask Rachel for help. However, after what happened at the port, they had no idea whether Rachel would forgive them. "Let's call Rachel," Dorothy picked up her cell phone with trembling hands. "But what can we say?" Christina's voice was also trembling. "We have to apologize. And ask for help." When Rachel returned from work, she saw 2 figures in front of her entrance. Dorothy and Christina were standing there with small suitcases. Both looked exhausted. "Rachel," Dorothy's voice trembled. "We need to talk. Please, could you spare us just a little time?" Rachel opened the door with mixed feelings. When they entered the living room, Jacob looked up from the dining table where he had been doing homework. He stared at his grandmother and aunt, but his expression clouded as he remembered what happened at the port. "Jacob, could you continue your homework upstairs?" Rachel gently called to her son. Okay, Mom. Jacob picked up his textbooks and stood up, but looked back at the three of them as he climbed the stairs. Dorothy and Christina began crying as soon as they sat on the sofa. Rachel, we did something truly horrible. Dorothy was the first to speak. What happened at the port is inexcusable. Especially toward Jacob, it was shameful behavior for a grandmother. I was the worst too, Christina continued. As an aunt, as a sister, as a human being, I was the worst. At that time, all we could think about was money. Rachel listened to their words in silence. Her expression was calm, but inside, complex emotions were swirling. Right now, we're really in trouble, Dorothy continued. Christina's apartment is being evicted, and I can't pay my utility bills. But what's more painful than that is having hurt our family. Could we stay here for just a few days? Christina pleaded. And if possible, a little financial assistance? At that moment, they heard the sound of the front door opening. Thomas and Helen had arrived for dinner as promised. Seeing the situation in the living room, they immediately understood what was happening. Oh my, Helen showed a surprised expression. Dorothy and Christina. Thomas was calm, but there was clear wariness in his eyes. How was your cruise, you two? Dorothy and Christina couldn't answer Thomas's sarcastic question. Rachel, let's have a family meeting, Helen suggested. I think this is a problem we all need to discuss. Jacob was also called, and everyone sat around the dining table. Thomas, drawing on his experience as a former police chief, began organizing the situation. First, let's confirm the facts, Thomas began speaking calmly. You two deliberately excluded Jacob from a family trip and used Rachel as transportation. This is clearly fraudulent behavior. Furthermore, you received financial assistance from Rachel for an extended period while abusing that goodwill. Dorothy and Christina kept their heads down and couldn't argue back. Helen spoke from a psychological perspective. Most serious of all is the wound inflicted on Jacob's heart. Do you understand the cruelty of telling an 11-year-old child that he's not family? Jacob sat quietly, but you could see various emotions swirling in his small chest. Jacob suddenly stood up. Everyone's attention focused on him. I want to forgive Grandma and Aunt Christina. The adults were surprised. Rachel placed her hand on her son's shoulder. Jacob, you don't have to force yourself to forgive. But Mom, Jacob continued with tears in his eyes. Everyone makes mistakes sometimes, right? When I lost Dad, I was so angry that I hit my friend Mike. But the teacher forgave me, and Mike forgave me too. I learned something. Holding on to anger makes your heart heavier than forgiving does. If Dad were still alive, I think he would say the same thing. Jacob turned toward Dorothy and Christina. But will you promise not to make me sad anymore? Dorothy and Christina were deeply moved by the words of the boy who was their grandson and nephew. They answered with choked voices. I promise, Jacob, Dorothy said through tears. I will never make you sad again. I promise too, Christina was also crying. From now on, I'll be a real aunt. Rachel, Thomas, and Helen were moved by Jacob's kindness and mature thinking. However, as adults, they also needed to respond realistically. Jacob's generous heart is moving, Thomas said. However, forgiveness and rebuilding trust are separate issues. To regain trust, you need to show it through actions. Helen made a specific proposal. It's not complete forgiveness, but we propose conditional assistance. We'll give you both a 1-year probationary period. 1-year probationary period? Christina asked. During that time, you'll need to show efforts toward independence and relationship repair, Rachel explained. Specifically, obtaining stable income, creating a debt repayment plan, and most importantly, rebuilding your relationship of trust with Jacob. Thomas added, if you fail to meet the conditions, assistance will be cut off. Please understand that this is your last chance. Also, you'll need to submit reports on how you use money going forward, Helen added. Transparency is the first step toward rebuilding trust. Dorothy and Christina understood that while these were strict conditions, they were the natural consequences of their actions. I understand, Dorothy answered. In 1 year, I will definitely regain your trust. I'll do my best too, Christina continued. I'll become an aunt that Jacob won't be ashamed of. That night, Rachel prepared simple beds in the small guest room for the two of them. However, unlike before, this wasn't unconditional hospitality. She made it clear this was strictly a temporary measure. Starting tomorrow, you two will begin job hunting, Rachel told them. This assistance is only for 3 months' rent for a small apartment. During that time, you must definitely establish a path to independence. Thank you, Rachel, Dorothy said in a small voice, for giving us this opportunity. This is your last chance, Rachel answered sternly. There won't be a second one. Before going to bed, Jacob said to his mother, Mom, do you think I did the right thing? You have such a kind heart, Rachel embraced her son. But kindness and being soft are different things. This time is an opportunity to learn that there can be strictness within kindness. Do you think Dad is proud of me too? I'm sure he's proud of you. You have the same strong heart as Dad, one that can forgive people. 3 months later, definite changes had appeared in Dorothy and Christina's lives. In the small apartment that Rachel had helped with, the two were trying for the first time to rebuild their lives through their own efforts. Dorothy had begun working part-time as a library assistant at the neighborhood library. It was 4 days a week, 5 hours a day, but for her it was income she had earned herself for the first time in years. Here's today's pay, Dorothy showed Christina a small envelope. $450. I never thought such a small amount of money could feel so heavy. Christina was using her skills as a beautician and had begun volunteer haircuts at a nearby senior facility. At first it was unpaid, but she gained a good reputation with residents and their families, and gradually increased her customers as a paid visiting beautician. Today I did a perm for Grandma Margaret, Christina talked while making dinner. She's 80 years old, but she says, make me beautiful like when I was young. Joy that isn't about money, this is what that means. Every Saturday, Jacob visited their apartment. At first it was awkward, but gradually a truly family-like relationship began to develop. Grandma, is working at the library fun? Jacob asked. It's very enjoyable. Today I read a picture book to a little girl. That child was about your age and very bright. Dorothy's eyes now held pure joy rather than the calculating light of before. Exhausted from chasing money, she was finally beginning to find real happiness in relationships with people. Once a month, everyone gathered for dinner together. Thomas and Helen also participated, with 3 generations sitting around the same table. However, the road to complete rehabilitation wasn't smooth. One day, when a local newspaper article was published about Rachel winning a graphic design contest, Dorothy reflexively said, "How much was the prize money?" In that moment, the table fell silent. Dorothy realized what she had said and blushed. "I'm sorry. My old habit came out again." "Grandma," Jacob said gently. "The prize money is less important than Mom working hard." Dorothy looked at her grandson with tears in her eyes. "You're right, Jacob. You're absolutely right." Christina also faced trials. One of her visiting beauty customers was a very wealthy woman, and when the topic of luxury brands came up, her old vain personality showed through. "I used to have a Chanel bag too," she accidentally lied. But that night, tormented by guilt, she honestly apologized. "Family isn't just about blood relationships," Christina spoke to Jacob. "It's bound together by trust and love." When autumn came around again, Dorothy had the possibility of being promoted to a full-time position at the library. Christina had also signed a formal contract with the senior facility and gained stable income as a visiting beautician 3 days a week. "I still have debt payments remaining," Christina reported to Rachel. "But if I pay back $300 a month, I can pay it all off in 3 years." "That's wonderful," Rachel was genuinely happy. The attitude of trying to recover through your own efforts is what's most important. One Sunday afternoon, while having a picnic in the park, Jacob looked up at the sky and murmured, "Dad, are you watching? We became a real family." Dorothy and Christina were deeply moved by those words. They were finally beginning to understand true value that money cannot buy. The road to complete trust recovery was still long. Sometimes old habits would surface. However, the two were definitely changing. And most importantly, Jacob's pure soul was leading the entire family in a good direction. At dusk, Rachel gazed outside from the kitchen window while thinking. True family wasn't just about blood relationships, but about relationships where people support and grow with each other. And forgiveness wasn't a momentary emotion, but a form of love built up over a long time. David's photo was illuminated by the sunset, seeming to smile. He was surely watching over this new form of family too.